Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, a marketing exec, chief jargon buster, and I help ground AI in your practical day-to-day.
And I'm Kyle. I live at the intersection of data, product, and strategy, and I do my best to turn the technical AI chaos into something you can actually use.
We go beyond the overhyped headlines and give you the unvarnished truth about AI, what's real, what's hype, and what actually matters for your business.
Every week, we simplify the complex, spotlight the risks, and give you practical tools to make smarter decisions as the landscape rapidly shifts around us.
From agents to commerce to prompt engineering and vibe coding, we deliver honest insights, actionable strategies, and zero gatekeeping.
Let's dive in.
This is Early Adopter.
Welcome to Early Adopter, where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Kyle, and you'll notice that Jess is not here with us this week. She is traveling, so we are very fortunate today to have our friend of the pod, Sean Bardwaj, joining me as a co-host. Sean, how you doing? How was your week?
I am great, Kyle. It's already February, and AI is still in the air. I've been having lots of conversations with business leaders, doing workshops around AI and education, helping organizations adopt it. So it's been super busy, but good busy. How's your week been?
Yeah, week has been very, very busy myself. I was at a conference in Denver on Monday and Tuesday where I moderated a panel about data and AI and where it's going, and a lot of questions around, how to best use it, how to get people at the board and C-suite level involved, and then what are some of the regulatory and policy decisions that people have to deal with, which I know is one of your big areas of expertise that you're constantly talking to business owners about. So we'll exchange notes on that. But yeah, it's been a good week, and no AI bubble bursting yet, which is great. So we're still good on the AI.
So this week we're talking about Claude Cowork. And I think maybe we should back up and do a little bit of setup because the name is a little bit misleading.
And I'm excited about us covering this topic. Obviously, it's getting a lot of hype out there in the world. And as always, we like to do is break it down into how to use it practically, what it is, why it matters to this audience. So very excited to have you on here because I think we're also going to get into the risks of it. We've both tested it out a little bit, even though it's super new. It's one of those things where the name doesn't really capture what's happening. Cowork sounds like collaboration software, but I would say it's probably a little bit more than that.
Yeah. And, normally with new tools, despite being very interested in innovation, I always feel like I need another software tool or feature, like I need another hole in my head. But so as I first started to understand it, right, like this is more of an evolution of the projects and folders feature that we have in other platforms. So with it, you can point the AI to a set of folders and files on your computer instead of having to drag them in one by one. And when I first heard that, I was thinking that really doesn't sound like very much or a big deal, but I think it could have some pretty significant implications.
We covered last time the whole Claude bot OpenClaw fiasco. So I definitely think people should have a little bit of caution when they start thinking about connecting their local files and folders to AI, just randomly. We'll get into kind of how it works with Cowork. I think as far as the ways that to do that, it's a good way. So, but getting back to what it does, it's not just reading these files and folders to like inform or give context, but it actually opens these files, can create new documents, organize folders, and then perform multi-step tasks. I have a silly example we'll get to, but actually I think that reading and analyzing each document as it goes through is a pretty interesting step. Also, this is for everyone. So anyone can use this. And I found it to be, once I got through my dumb issue of like just finding where it was on Claude Desktop, it was very easy to use, which when we've talked about in the past, especially multi-step workflows, it's developers writing scripts or using orchestration tools like and Make. That was more like IT teams or someone with technical savviness building automation. This is very different to that. I mean, it's anyone with a computer can tell AI to do something from within their file base, and the AI will start to break it down and complete those tasks.
Yeah, I think that's the big deal about this, right? Like the so what is kind of hidden. And this is moving everyone towards agentic like workflows and AI as an assistant without them being as technically sophisticated as you need to be today. And that shift is once again in the interface, right? Now I don't have to think about what context or files I need to give it for a given project or a question when I'm working. I just point it at everything and let it do the heavy lifting.
Hmm.
And that's something that all companies are going to want, but especially the large model developers, right? And
Hmm.
so they want more access to my data. What do you think about that, Kyle?
We've always used the analogy of the ladder of autonomy. This to me feels like a really big step up that ladder, or a big leap in the rungs of this ladder. It does bring up the point about the larger companies and having access to what you're doing, especially if you're talking about an environment where they can train on this data. Anthropic released Claude as a desktop app that can access your file system. Google's doing similar things with Gemini. OpenAI is testing versions of this, and I'm sure there will be a fast follow so they can keep track. So all of the companies are getting closer to accessing your local computer and your local files. Obviously, that's going to come with some security concerns, but also it's a huge unlock for what you can do.
Yeah, and I think as always, all of the big companies are going to move towards feature parity. So that makes sense and it's good for their business models. But I think the question we also want to answer today is it good for users and businesses, right? In
Mhm.
typical AI tool fashion, I've seen all the range of responses from people who are super excited about it to shoulder shrugs to concern about what this actually means for
Mhm.
daily work and maybe a little bit of confusion too.
Totally. So, with that, today we're going to break down what Claude Cowork actually is, where it's useful, where the risks are, and what founders and business owners should be thinking about before they just point it at their entire hard drive and have the AI go crazy. With that, let's start with the basics. So, we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but just to really kind of summarize, Claude Cowork is a feature inside the Claude desktop app. So you have to have the desktop app specifically, not be going through the browser. It's a really key distinction. Most people probably use OpenAI or Gemini through the browser, maybe even Claude, but this is specific to the Claude desktop app. And that's important because it's going to interact with your local system, your local computer.
Yeah, and so in the browser, right, you're just chatting. You can upload a file, it reads it, gives you an answer, but then you have to take that output from the AI and do something with it yourself. And I always find that to be a little bit cumbersome, right? Because then I always have to think about which files I need, what's the context, right? And find
Mhm.
them. I have to upload them into System A or Project B, whatever it is. But I kind of like that friction a little bit because then I can control what the AI has access to.
Yeah, and I think that is where people are going to get hung up here a little bit. Cowork is going to enable you to take a little bit of the lazy approach where you can just point Claude at a folder on your computer and then you can let it do things within that folder, but you don't have to really design the context as much, which is, as we know, very important. So this might be one of those instances where you can give it access to everything, but maybe that's too much. But once you do give it access to that file system, you can have Cowork do quite some pretty interesting things. And we'll get into those use cases, but you can have it complete a range of tasks from reading through documents to creating new files. You can have it edit existing documents that are just sitting in your file folders. You can have it organize file folders. And we'll talk about this in a sec. I think this one's a really good one because, as we all know, file folders are an absolute mess. But basically, any task that involves moving files around or producing documents or reading things, Cowork is quite accomplished at doing.
Yeah, and still it might sound like, right? Like that's just iterative, it's nothing major. It might even sound like what somebody thinks AI should already be doing or it kind of does. But let's make it concrete, right? So
Mhm.
what does this look like in practice?
So in practice, this could look like a folder full of receipts, screenshots, PDFs, whatever you have. And you can tell Claude, turn these into an expense report with categories and totals. And it'll create a spreadsheet with formulas in that folder, and it creates the actual file, not just text or not just something you have to copy paste, but like an actual spreadsheet in whatever format you need. Another really great example that I recently just did, like literally an hour ago, which is something I've been meaning to do forever. I'm not proud of this, Sean, but I have tons and tons of screenshots and this living on my desktop, and they're just cluttering my desktop. So I pointed Claude Cowork at my desktop and said, analyze and organize these screenshots. It took 166 screenshots that I had. Yeah, sorry about that. and organized it by project, by structure, and moved it off of my desktop into my Google Drive folder. Something I probably would never have done. I've been meaning to do for at least a year, and it's probably 2 years worth of screenshots that it did within 5 minutes. So not proud of it, but I'm very happy that it was able to do it.
That's amazing. I mean, you say screenshots, right? And we have that, but you think about like how many pictures, how many documents that we have that are like years old, right? And for those of us who've been around the internet and technology era, like there's I had this old computer and I copied over all my files and it's now like 15 years old. I don't know if I'll ever use those files, or heck, if you can even open like, those formats.
Yeah.
But I can never get the time to go back and look at it myself. And I also don't have a tool to do it for me automated. Now it sounds like we might. So to me, it feels like, we use this analogy of an intern, an infinite intern, or like an MBA level intern. And like my intern just got smarter, or maybe like they're getting out of that temporary probationary period. So instead of having to handhold them files and emailing them everything and copy pasting and doing all the admin work myself, I can just ask them, go do the thing, and they can do more of it end to end. And so done right, that's really useful because we don't think about it, but a lot of that, just the drudgery, right? Creating files, doing the formatting, saving them to the right place in the file structure, it does end up taking quite a bit of time. The analogy I have in my head, Kyle, is like, this is kind of like that deep research or agent modes that ChatGPT had, but focused more on desktop and not online. Is that how you see it?
I think that's honestly the perfect analogy. Spot on, quite frankly. It's pointing the deep research at your local files and folders. And why I think that's a great example is because if you have used deep research before, you can always see it planning out and doing the different steps. And that's exactly how Cowork works and feels. You ask it a question, usually it comes back with some follow-up questions, just like the deep research function does. So it can better understand your objectives and the inputs. And then you see it plan and go through each step as it completes the task. So in that way, it feels just like deep research, but again, just pointed, I guess maybe it's the internal versus external, internally to your desktop versus externally to the internet. And I think that proposing a plan is really important. And as we think about AI tools going forward, it's really helpful.
Personally, that feature to me is like the most interesting and useful, right? Because whether it's a real employer or an AI, I can always tell how smart something is by the amount of and the quality of the questions it asks me before responding to me, right? And the most frustrating thing for me is when I put in a prompt, and yes, I use it a lot, and sometimes it's a voice prompt, and sometimes it's just me riffing off the cuff, and my brain thinks in giant spider webs. But it's frustrating when it just guesses wrong and then gives you this giant output where you have to read it and then re-explain what you actually wanted and give it all this additional guidance information. So I often tell my prompts to ask me questions first, get more context and clarify intent before acting, but it doesn't always do that. So it's nice to review the plan before it does anything. But kind of going back to the easy piece of this, right? Like I'm having to do a lot of that manually. I have to know it and manage it. What's the setup like for Claude Cowork, Kyle? Can you share how people can get started using it?
Yeah, but I do want to touch on one thing before I get to that. And I think what you said was really, really important. And it's the planning aspect. Whether you're using Claude Code, whether you're using Cowork, whether you're using general prompting, I think we're getting to a place, and if I can give one suggestion to the audience, is planning out is becoming, like, planning how you want an AI or an agent to work and answer is probably becoming the new like AI superpower. Whether you're planning out your project and then having Claude Code build it, whether you're planning out your prompt with like the way you want it to respond, that's huge. Anyway, I'll get off my little soapbox there, but I think what you said there was just so perfect.
Let me put an exclamation mark on that, Kyle. So here's a phrase I learned from some of my military friends, right? Prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. The end.
Amazing. How many P's is that? But that's perfect.
Don't
say that
ask an
5
AI.
times fast.
Yes.
But yeah, it's true, because I think AI moves so quickly and it performs the tasks so quickly without without us being able to stop it in between. You need the prior planning up front to make sure that it executes properly. A lot of P's in there. But okay, so going back to your original question though, like how does Claude Cowork actually work? How do you use it? This was the dumb question or the dumb bit I had. It took me a long time to find it. If you go to Claude Desktop, It's really simple. It's just at the top. They've now segmented so it has like chat, cowork, and code all within the desktop app. I was looking on the left nav bar forever trying to figure it out. I was in my settings. I was like, where do I turn this thing on? How do I figure it out? Yeah, it's a lot easier than that. So you open the Claude desktop, you can click up at the top, which will take you into like a cowork area. And that's where you can start a task. The first thing it will ask or that you want to set up is like, which folder do you want to work in? So you can point it to a specific folder that has files that are relevant. You can point it to like a high level folder if you want it to go through and organize a lot of different things. But you want to point it at a folder on your computer. Then, and also to be clear, you need to have the Claude desktop app, which runs on your local machine on Mac and Windows. And you do need this for the Pro, Team, or Enterprise, so you can't be on the free version. So a little bit of a heads up there. And then one other tidbit I will add that I actually like from a security perspective is it will ask you if it can access your local files every time you want to set off a task. That might be a good security protocol for you to make sure that it just doesn't have all-time access to your computer.
Yeah, that's helpful, Kyle. And Anthropic, if you're listening, clip that little segment there and share it with everyone so they know how to actually use Claude Cowork. That would be useful to know. So from a security point of view, right, like really focusing on it, I think that is really what makes this viable at all and not just a non-starter is because it can only see and touch the files in the folders you explicitly give it access to. It's not scanning your whole hard drive, which is critically important for a work context because you're going to have some files that have confidential or proprietary or personally identifiable information. And I want to keep those away from prying eyes, robot or human.
Spot on. That control is really important. Now, keep in mind, this is a relatively new feature. So I think we're talking like a month old at this point, maybe a couple months. So it's early days. And I think a lot of people are still figuring it out. When I did some research around different use cases, there's not a lot out there just yet. So it is cutting edge. But that's why we want to talk about it now, to explore how our audience can use it to save some time on some busy work.
Yes. So let's get into that and maybe talk a little bit about why this is a bigger deal and will be bigger than just the small feature that it sounds like. But I'm going to go back to that kind of skeptical person, right? Like I need another AI tool, like I need another hole in my boat. I don't. So when I'm making decisions about using new tools, I like to make sure I have that full context so I know where they're heading with it before I integrate it into my business and my workflow. Can we talk about the technology and business for a minute before we go further? Like what makes Claude Cowork possible from a technology perspective? Like why didn't they just do this at launch? And maybe why does Anthropic, and as we talked about before with everyone kind of getting to the same place in feature parity, why do all these companies think this is the right next step for the large AI products?
That's interesting. I think from the technology side, there are some technical components that are converging at once. One of which is that the technology works well enough that normal people can use it. I think you've done enough now around like the agentic workflows that you can actually start to have these multi-step workflows that solve problems where you don't need to be as much of a developer side. So I think, the fact that it's just not a developer tool anymore, that it's accessible and that this agentic idea is accessible is a big part of it. Because automation isn't new. Scripting isn't new, but historically you needed technical skills to get any real leverage. So the capability existed, but the interface didn't. Now I think they've solved the interface bit because a lot of the technology that underlies this is working really, really well. And they've been able to spin up a lot of cycles. So the fact that you can now describe a task in plain English and the system can execute multi-steps through to achieve a good result. The fact that they've gotten there now means they can put an interface around it where we can all use it and not have to be very technically savvy.
Yeah. And then I think looking at it on the business side, right, it's a great way to expand their access to data and information by making it easier to use and providing a more frictionless, call it lazy, right, user experience and improving the quality of the outcomes and what we get. And also then it gets people more used to using AI in this hands-off type of way, which is pretty smart from a business strategy point of view to drive more adoption and use. Worst case, they learn from the interactions and data to improve the model and future offerings. And then best case, they've got almost a fully automated assistant or tool coming up.
Yeah. And I think by tackling, personally, I respect the decision, but I think everyone will appreciate that they're tackling the administrative and operational tasks, the stuff that we just don't want to do and just have never really done. Organizing files, pulling reports, formatting documents, some of the use cases we'll get into. These are things that no one likes doing and we're just not doing. So there's always the joke of like, I want AI to do the boring stuff so I can make art, not AI to do art so I have to do the boring stuff. They're finally coming after the boring stuff. So I think we're all going to love that bit. And here's the thing, they're not very high value strategic tasks, but they're constant and they're annoying that they eat into your week and your time. So I think why this is so great is that we're finally getting, we're finally getting AI that's going to go after these boring, repetitive tasks that no one wants to do to free us up to do the more strategic stuff. So I'm really excited about it from that lens. I think it's exactly the right thing that they've gone after. And it's also, I think, a really good time because at least for the people who are using AI regularly, I think there's starting to be a lot more trust around the outputs. And so now I kind of have enough trust to point this at my local files and folders and to start interacting with my local environment.
Yeah. And I think that's the good fundamentals piece, right? So in my work as a fractional CTO, I work with organizations and I always tell them the technology is going to accelerate the function or dysfunction that you already have in place. And that's where this is really valuable. And the end game here for small teams, right, or individuals, you're not going to add a project manager or an executive assistant or an operations manager to your one-person team or to a small group or to a small business just to do this type of drudgery. But if we can get to a place where we can trust the AI to do it, it's going to not just make your work and your life easier, but set the foundation for you to do more and be more efficient and make use of more AI tools and capabilities.
Absolutely. The system being able to not just suggest work, but complete it is a pretty fundamental shift. Even a year ago, getting good output for writing content felt like magic. Now that's pretty par for the course. And so we've moved to that next evolution where we can start stitching workflows together, not even having to design that stitch ourselves, right? It's just AI is going to handle that.
And not to beat a dead horse here, right? But it sounds so basic, but I think this is really profound, especially for managers and leaders to understand. And if you're in the weeds, you know this, right? But just last week, I had a discussion with a client I was working with, and there was this question of how do we pull reports and automate, going from system A, exporting a report, updating it, and then pushing it out into system B. And it sounds basic, but one of the issues we had is there was no standardized file structure, right? The first system put files out into SharePoint, and then the next person took those files and downloaded them into a Google Drive folder, and the third person took them, and then as they were moving the files, the names of the file changed, right? So simple naming conventions, and everyone who codes or is a project manager will understand just the simple, do you label things like year, month, day, or year, day, month, those little things will be I can run this report or I can't run this report, or I can use the information from the last 3 months or the last 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So the standardizing the file structures is so important. This data cleanup and ability to pull reports is massively important. We don't have time to go back and do that sort of administrative work, but it's huge.
And I definitely tested this a little bit because I wanted to just see how well it could do. I've been using, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, I use Claude. I will connect Claude to MCP servers that I sit on top of databases to do a lot of early exploration on that data. And it's incredibly good at breaking down the tasks, having information, synthesizing it, and giving me responses. What's really exciting about Claude Cowork is that it's now doing that on top of my local files as well. So pointing it to a folder with a bunch of different Excels and summarizing and analyzing that data is very simple and also doesn't take a lot of, I would say, complex data understanding. Sean, you touched on the surface, different naming conventions, different data types, all of that can really add to a lot of complexity when you're trying to get maybe a simple answer of how good the data is and what the data is trying to show you. Cowork has, I think, made that really simple and straightforward. So you can focus more on the objective you're trying to get out of the data rather than trying to understand how to use it. And I think this is a big unlock for people who maybe would consider themselves non-data savvy. Now you don't need to be, right? Download a bunch of reports, put it in a file folder, and have Cowork go and analyze it and summarize it for you. And it's going to get some really great insights.
And and just thinking about it in the macro sense, right? Like there are people in these roles. And so we
Mhm.
continue to see how AI has an impact on those who are earlier in their career or maybe have these sort of baseline level skills that are things that can be
Mhm.
automated away. But I do want to say that yes, there's going to be an impact there, right? We continue to see that that's where work is getting eroded to some degree.
Mhm.
And we don't want to take away from that. At the same time, given that we all have to learn and upskill and grow, this is a fantastic tool for those folks to make their work go faster, right? Like the best administrative assistants, project managers that I know, it's not their ability to like take things and organize them and memorize the schemas and know that like that's not their real value. Their real value is on top of that. It's like, yes, they do that, but they do that so they can provide like, hey, this is the stuff you need to look out for, or hey,
Yeah.
here's the next step we can do. And I think that ability to have those best practices and really the manual work that you're doing be done by AI versus you doing it one by one, you can focus your time doing higher value work and
Mhm.
getting appropriately paid for it and compensated for it, right? Like that way you're not getting automated out, you're getting automated up the value chain. And I think that is super important.
I love that. I think that's spot on. I think for the last couple of years, AI has been mostly, we talk about the intern, but more of like an advisor type intern where you're reading and then responding back. You'd ask for help, get a recommendation, but then you have to go execute it separately. Using your example of the assistant, Cowork now starts nudging AI into a little bit of a different role, something closer to an active participant working side by side with you. Again, moving up that ladder of autonomy into something that's really useful.
Yeah, and I also want to call in like, while I'm all in favor of doing the drudgery work and being more hands off of that, I think it's even more important that we keep our head on, right? And we have
Hmm.
to be more thoughtful about what it's doing, validating the outcomes, and using those time savings to do higher value work.
Completely agree.
Okay, so now that we've laid this groundwork, right, and we've set it in the framework, let's talk some brass tacks and get into real world examples where you can use Cowork. Kyle, I know you gave us the screenshot examples, but how about something that maybe more of our business folks might see on a day to day basis?
Look, hey, I think all of us probably have a drawer of stuff they need to organize. Really, to step back, the easiest category to understand is document work. So this could be expense reports. You've got a folder full of receipts, screenshots, PDFs, photos from your phone, and you
Okay,
can.
I'm not sure if anyone else just had like a shiver down their spine from like PTSD for expense reports. You're like back from a conference, you're jet lagged, you're trying to like flatten out and like decode those smashed up folded receipts from like the one coffee you got like in the middle of the day after
Spot
traveling
on.
for work. So delightful.
I'm probably the worst at this by a long shot because manually entering all of that into a spreadsheet is miserable as you're identifying. But here's a great use case. Cowork can read through all of those, whether it's screenshots or your maybe your credit card expense report, whatever it is. It can read through it, extract the dates, the vendors, the amounts, categorize them, and create a formatted Excel file with totals and formulas. So you're no longer sitting there transcribing receipt after receipt, having to enter it manually somewhere. You're just reviewing the final output and making sure that the numbers all match.
Okay, I'm a little more enthusiastic about Cowork now because I would gladly offload those types of administrative tasks, as I'm sure everyone who doesn't have an amazing executive assistant would, right?
Yeah, and it's so easy. This example in particular, create a folder called 2025 expense cleanup. Just dump every receipt in there and maybe even dump the CSV of your credit card statement that has all the expenses so you know you don't miss anything. And then just tell Cowork, create a categorized expense report in Excel, group by month with totals per category in a summary tab. It's that easy. And you'll get the Excel. You can forward that on to your HR department and you're done. I mean, it's like literally that easy and it's very good.
Yeah, and I think what's amazing is it produces it, right? So you can review it, and if it's good, it's good, and if it's
Yeah.
not, you're still working with an AI tool. You can be like, nope, do it again, or no, pull this out, or why did you categorize? Like, there's still that conversation and the iteration piece that I
Yeah.
think a lot of times people forget is where you get the most value out of it, right?
Mm, totally.
So another one, and this is something I'm prone to, right, in my work, is like research synthesis. I have at any one time like 4 or 5 giant dense reports about AI
Mhm.
and AI use, and I don't like reading just the, news article. I'm like, what's your source? And I go download the PDF and actually try to read through it. But
Yeah.
after a while, and a while for me is like in 2 weeks, I've got like a dozen of these things open. I've made some notes about them here or there. Maybe I've talked to someone about it and I need one coherent brief, right? So Cowork
Mhm.
can pull all this together. I just pointed at my folder. It's got all the key points, action item sources into one structured document.
Yeah. And the obvious question to ask is, well, why is this easier than me uploading these to a folder or to an AI tool already? And I mean, it seems simple, but I think it is relevant that it's the efficiency of not having to upload, not having to design the multi-step thinking process we talked about before. So Cowork is doing a lot of the organization and the synthesis work more effectively and kind of just automatically, and then creates the document and the output that you need in the format that you required. So it's just streamlining. And I think for some of us, we talk about prompting as being so important. It inherently has some very advanced prompting to get good output from what you ask it.
That is awesome because I can get behind it if it does it right.
Mhm.
As I'm thinking about this, right, does it mean they're going after the AI generated slide deck market as well?
Yeah, I don't know if it was intentional, but it absolutely will do that. One of the things that has been a struggle up until this point, or if you even just use Claude or ChatGPT off the shelf, you ask it to produce a slide deck, it might produce a bulleted outline of a slide deck, but it's not going to actually produce a PDF or PowerPoint. This will go ahead and do that, right? So you can point it at a bunch of local files, CSVs, analysis, PDFs, whatever you want, rough notes from transcripts, anything like that. And Cowork can create the structure, title slides, section headers, key points laid out, synthesizing, because it goes through and it does like the deep research bit. It's going to read each file, it's going to synthesize that information, and then it's going to come up with like an output report in PowerPoint or Google Slides rather than having to take an outline and then put that into a blank deck.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so one less obvious case that I can think of, and maybe, we touched on this before, right, is data cleanup.
Hmm.
And again, we don't think about that enough, but really getting tactical here, right? Like you've got a messy CSV or Excel file, duplicates, inconsistent formatting, categories that don't line up. And right now we have to do that all manually and just run like dedupe, run checking, right? Like separate all those things. So with Cowork type
Hmm.
tools, they can do this. We can dedupe everything, standardize formatting, clean up the categories. And I think you can create basic charts or pivot tables.
Yeah, it's great for the exploration. I'm very curious to see where this goes as someone who is doing a lot of data analysis and data visualization within companies and all that. Pretty excited about where this evolves to. But I think for most people that aren't super involved in data analysis and visualization on a day to day basis, this is an incredibly powerful tool to connect it to some of your CSVs or Excels, do some cleanup very quickly, get a clean output from what you give it with the right folders and data types you have so that you can then produce some charts and pivot tables and really do a lot more with that data than you otherwise would have. The next one that I want to talk about, another example, which is here and something we've talked about in the past, which is kind of like the holy grail for a lot of people, but email inbox management, like the bane of everyone's existence. But I try not to do this because I'm OCD, at least around email. But if you've got a backlog, like hundreds of unread emails, Cowork can help you triage a lot of that, archive obvious junk, flag what's important, and then maybe even create a sorting system for you and then sort accordingly. So I think you need to be careful about sensitive content, and emails start to really get into that layer or area of sensitive content. But for general cleanup, again, just like my screenshot example, if you have like a bunch of junk in there, Cowork could be a really great way to clean a lot of that.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. And for emails and stuff, I want to get to a place where, if someone's sending me an AI generated email or it's like automated with an agent, I want my agent to be able to respond to that. It's like the
Hmm.
2026 version of like have your AI call my AI and like set something up, right? But like if it's someone who put in the efforts, like write me a personal thank you, I want it to just send it to me so I can read it and enjoy it and decide how to respond.
Yeah.
But I think
Well,
we're taking a step.
that brings up an important point about like maybe as users we should also be tagging our content as AI going forward. No one's doing that on a personal level. I know businesses are starting to get pushed towards that, but we might want to think about doing that on a personal side as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, right? Like it's all about that policy and transparency,
Hmm.
and where we draw that line. So stepping back, I'm reminded of that, and then maybe it's just my brain always thinks of things in strategy and business all the time. But that, Steve Jobs had this meeting purportedly with the founders of Dropbox where he looked at them and he said, "You're a feature, not a product." And what I'm seeing is that for all those other like AI wrapper products out there,
Hmm.
like PowerPoint creators or data analysis tools, the big AI vendors are saying, don't sign up for those. We can do it all ourselves. So, AI wrapper startups beware. And if your company is using one of these tools, unless it's truly unique and specialized, just something to be on the lookout for. Because if that feature gets ingested into the main model, then it's likely that that company will be out of business. So you got to protect your data, protect your information. And
Hmm.
the more steps of the process that they automate, right? The more files that these companies get access to, the better tools that they produce, which could be good. But the risk, of course, is that we're sharing that information and giving up more control, which is why it's really important for us to not just manage it at our individual level and like our team and our company level, but also then, advocate for the type of governance and ethics that we want to see.
Absolutely. I think we've laid out a lot of that upside, but I think it's really smart and always part of our ethos to identify the risks. So let's dive into that a little bit, Sean.
Let's do it. And I probably just need to say, given my perspective here, that like we are AI positive, I am AI positive, with the caveat of proper governance, ethics, and compensation for the stakeholders involved, right? So this isn't an AI apocalypse conversation by any sense of the word, but there are real risks. And as a business owner, as a business leader, it's important to be aware of them and do what you can to mitigate them.
And this is now that we're starting to get further up the ladder of autonomy, we have to be careful. When Claude is just giving you text in a browser, the worst thing that happens is you get bad advice or poorly written content. And again, we talk about human oversight. You can manage that. But when these tools now are starting to touch your files, so create new files, move things, more importantly, delete things, right? That can be a little scary. The stakes are different, much higher. Quite frankly, we saw this just play out last week with the OpenClaw Claudebot conversation. So it's definitely something to be wary of.
Yeah, and so that the first risk to me is the most obvious one and maybe one of the most personal to me is like it's touching my stuff, right? And I'm one of those people that can have a pile of things, but I know everything in that pile. And if you like move that pile to be more organized by whatever some classical definition of that is, I will completely lose my context. I don't know where the heck anything is. So the fact
Mhm.
that it can touch my stuff, like the actual files, if you give it access to the folder, and then the risks of that, right? Like if the
Yeah.
instructions are unclear or it misunderstands what you want, it can delete things, it can move things, or overwrite things.
Hmm. And Anthropic explicitly warns about this in in their documentation. They say deletion requires permission, but they also say you should use dedicated folders and keep backups. Mistakes happen. So the first risk is just things can go wrong if you're not careful about what you give access to. It does require you to give it explicit permission to files and folders. The second risk is that I think you'll give it too much access. So if you just gave it like access to your entire Google Drive, which I almost did before I stopped myself, that could potentially come with some risks. And when you're excited about a new tool, the temptation is just to give it full access and see what can happen. But I think I would caution people against that, as I cautioned my own internal conversation cautioned myself against it.
Yeah, it's really all about controlling what you give access to and what data is in there. And I think this concept, right, of narrow access, meaning you create a dedicated working folder, don't dump sensitive files into it that have information that you wouldn't want out into the world, is like just baseline something to start with. Kyle, any other risks you see?
Yeah, this one is going to become more and more prevalent. It's the what we'll call the automation trap. Look, I think we're all getting to a point where we're overloaded and we're expected to take on more than ever before. And so it sounds great to automate a lot of tasks. When something is automated though, you stop paying as close attention to it. You assume it's working correctly, or maybe you have some doubt or concerns on the first one, but then the second, third, 100th time, you're like, it worked the first time, I'm sure it's great. But over time, small errors can compound. Automation is still, this system could potentially have problems, so you need to stay vigilant.
Yeah, that's so true. It's really the human part of it, right? And I think this one's the most insidious one because a lot of times when we think about risk, especially in organizational context, we think of like big things, right? Like, what if we have a
Hmm.
giant data breach? What if, competitor releases like the exact same product? Like, what if someone does this big catastrophic thing? But it's all the little stuff, right, that are the most insidious. The bunch of tiny mistakes you don't notice until they create a bunch of problems downstream. Like tangibly, right? Let's go back to that example of using Cowork to categorize your expenses for your expense reports. And
Hmm.
it maybe consistently miscategorizes one type of receipt. My accounting friends will know that, I may or may not have been guilty of this, but it puts like your travel meals under entertainment instead of travel, right?
Hmm.
Like you won't notice in month one, it's probably not a big deal. Maybe not in month two, but this scales with the number of people and the number of times. So if you're a large organization or by the end of the year, your expense reports are all wrong. And you've probably been making budgeting decisions based on that bad data. And you
Yeah.
wouldn't even know that you should look for it.
Yeah. Totally. And I think even in this example, there's tax implications for how you treat meals versus entertainment and stuff like that. So there's always downstream implications, and you need to be careful of that. And ultimately, you would have been able to catch it if you reviewed it that first time. Because I think when things, especially when things are happening in the background, which Cowork is great at doing, if you trust the automation you see it the first time, you're going to stop checking it. And I think the risk is if you completely hand off that work and stop supervising it, that's going to be a real problem. If you go back to our intern analogy, you're probably not going to completely give up all tasks and all oversight to that intern given their experience level. You should think of Cowork the same. It looks like magic, but it still needs the proper oversight. Another, I think, example of this is maybe in web browsing. If you tell Cowork to read websites on your behalf, maybe to gather research or pull data, those websites could contain hidden instructions that try to manipulate what it does. So you constantly need to be monitoring what this is doing and watching the steps. I know it's very appealing or tempting to like ask it a question and then go off and do something else and go cook dinner, but you should probably continue to monitor that task.
Yes, at least the outputs, right? And then going back to the website example, I think this is a really interesting surface area for cybersecurity. And so what you just
Hmm.
described is called, right, prompt injection. So basically, it's malicious content that can try to trick the AI into doing something you didn't ask for. So it could
Hmm.
grab private data from your files or perform some actions you didn't intend. And even Anthropic acknowledges this is like a real unsolved security problem, and it's an ever-growing risk for everyone as AI gets embedded into more systems. So that whole principle of narrow access
Yeah.
could not be more important.
Yeah. Yeah. This is where the Claude bot OpenClaw had some issues. Giving it write and delete and update access to your system means that this prompt injection problem could really have some serious implications for what you're doing. Right now, Anthropic's guidance is only browse trusted sites, limit web access unless you really need it while you've connected the two systems together. But it's something to be aware of. And I'm not sure that that's quite the level of guardrails or protection we need at the moment. So definitely be very careful while we're still in this like beta experimentation phase.
Yeah, and I think that simple, like turn it on when you need it and turn it off when you don't
Mm,
is great principle as well, right? I there's just some basic things that we can do to be more protected, which is minor inconvenience. You have to boot it back up, but it takes like half a second, right? So turn it off when you don't need it. Okay, going back, summarizing all the risks. It can touch your files and make mistakes. Leaders might just over permission it, right?
mhm.
And automation can make us less careful. And web browsing and just introducing new tools and new connections introduces new attack vectors. So, how about we talk about some best practices, right? In addition to the ones we've discussed here, so people can safely experiment.
Yeah. Step one, easy one, start small. So pick one low stakes folder or file and one simple task. Don't give it access to everything, your entire drive or, your entire documents folder on your laptop.
Yeah, and we're maybe going to sound like a broken record, but just thinking about it like you would with any pilot of any tool or project, right? Start with that something straightforward and see what it does. Organize these files by type or delete the obvious duplicates or create a summary of these meeting notes and test on something that doesn't matter much. I think of like those movies, right? Those adventure movies where they like come across that old bridge, like between two mountain peaks, there's a giant valley below. They like look down, pan up. And it's like before running across it, they always like put their foot on it and they like tap. And you see the bridge like sway in the wind and like one plank falls off, right? And
Yep.
before they just like charge across it. So it's kind of like that. Dip your toe in the water and test it on something safe so you know how secure it is and it doesn't break down and you put more weight and more trust in it.
So step 2 is supervise it closely. We're hinting or suggesting this, but really check the work. Don't assume it did it correctly. As it's opening files, as it's organizing, make sure nothing important is getting moved or deleted in a way that you don't want. But it's really important that you keep track of what the system is doing. You're already going to get the huge time savings unlock by doing this. Spend a little bit more time monitoring the output, and you'll still be saving time overall.
Yeah, and you still need to verify, right? Like every time, but especially at the beginning. And one thing is to like look for patterns, right? Because just because something isn't 100% reliable doesn't mean it's not useful. It just means we need to understand where and how it's not working, and that's going to be individual to your workflow, your use case, your files, your querying. So, does it consistently misunderstand certain kinds of files? Is it like over deleting, under deleting? Does it create weird formatting? You're kind of quality assurancing it the way you would a junior employee, right? Because it's your reputation, even if it's their work. And so you just have to treat it in that same way.
Which brings us to step 3, expand slowly. So once you've run a few test cases or smaller tasks successfully, and you understand how it works and how to get the best output, then you could start giving it more responsibility, more important folders, more complex tasks, longer workflows. Just expand slowly and incrementally, and again, continue to monitor and be that oversight.
Perfect. So here's the TLDR, like, okay, what do these framework principles mean, right? First,
I need Jess here to buzz. What is TLDR for those that don't know?
too long didn't read, right?
Yep, love it.
Paired often in tech circles with RTFM, which is read the fluffing manual.
Yeah, there we go. I was wondering how you're going to handle that. We curse on this. Don't worry, Sean.
Oh, I know, but I'm practicing at home. I've got the toddler who just immediately repeats everything back. So, we're
Smart.
injecting substitutions here.
Love it.
Okay, so really getting tactical, right? First, create that dedicated Cowork folder and don't work in your main file system. Obvious, right? Copy files into that folder, let it do its thing, and then move the outputs from your Cowork folder to where they actually belong. Yes, it's a little bit more cumbersome. You're not using it to its full capabilities, but you're building that trust. And once you understand and can do it safely, it's going to work better.
Yep. Second, be specific about the outputs and objectives, in particular about deletion. So if you don't want it to delete any of your files, say that up front, especially if you're doing some of the data analysis we talked about, where you're trying to like remove duplicates, that requires a deletion step. So really explicit instructions around risky actions is super important. Now, Cowork will ask for permission before deleting or before accessing files, but it never hurts to be a little bit more clear and upfront.
Yes. And third is constraining web access, right? If you don't need it to browse websites, don't enable it. And if you do browse it, only use trusted sites, because this is the highest risk feature. Honestly, I would say just turn it off, right? For two reasons. One, if you need information from the web to be input, you can just treat that like a separate prompt in the core Claude platform. And two, if you do that, you can have two tasks working in parallel, giving you even more leverage, right? And then you take the input that you need from the web browsing piece and plug it in. But this is a tool to give you those web-based capabilities, but again, locally, like Kyle was mentioning.
Which I think gets us to the next point, which is just take a kind of a higher level view around integrations. Be careful with extensions and connectors. Every time you add a new integration, whether it's the web or whether it's, other connectors like Slack, Google Drive, whatever it is, you're creating another way data can flow in and out. So be very careful to stick to verified integrations and only add what you actually need.
Yes. And just as an aside, like I always assume everything I put, like type into a computer, and especially in these AI tools, could become a business record, right? So if you get into a legal dispute, whether it's employment, contract, whatever, your AI prompts and outputs could be treated as documents in discovery. And law firms are explicitly warning about this, right? So, and not to mention we have, people who screenshot ad nauseum. It's a real thing. And so if you're using AI for anything remotely sensitive, legal questions, HR issues, confidential strategy, that content might not be privileged. And so don't put anything confidential into your workflows unless you have a clear policy and unless you're safe of someone throwing that back at you at some point in time, right? Even if it's not a legal thing, just consider the ramifications of it. And just on that note, right? Like you do have an AI policy. Yes? Because if you don't, you have to go back to the episode where we talk about it and draft up your minimum viable AI policy.
I love that. Great plug. And Also very true. Unfortunately, Sean, I don't know if enough people have watched that episode because I encounter businesses all the time that still do not have a minimum viable policy. So get on that. That has been a lot of information for the audience very quickly. I think hopefully people will actually take notes on this one. But let's do a quick wrap up. So Claude Cowork is the beginning of a really big shift. We are absolutely moving up that ladder of autonomy. And identify that shift, for a really long time, decades really, software has been reactive, right? Reading the information. You click a button, it does something. You give it a command, it executes. Or you create an action and it records it. But it's always been waiting for you to do or to tell it exactly what to do. Now we're starting to get into an area where it's very different.
Yeah, and now we're seeing that next step, right? Like a completely different way to interact. It's starting to produce outcomes, not just when you tell it to, but on its own. And you get to just describe what you want and it figures out the how. This is a different relationship with technology. And while a lot of folks are still just catching up with like, okay, what is AI? Let me use basic prompting and just integrate the basic tool to our workflow. The technology is advancing, right? And the capabilities already moved to that next step. But it's not going to make you more productive just because it exists. The same rules apply. You have to learn how to work with it effectively, right? And it's a big change in skills. It's shifting from doing the work to directing the work. And that's the fundamental change that's being caused by AI.
Yeah. So you have to learn how to delegate effectively, even when you're delegating to software. Again, this is a tool. We talk about it as like that infinite intern, but again, infinite interns require delegation and instructions.
So I think that's a good place to wrap the main segment. And let's talk about the Super Bowl.
If you watched the game, I doubt you missed it, but there were AI ads everywhere. Now, maybe it was just me because, I exist in this space, but it turns out statistically is also true. 23% of all Super Bowl ads were explicitly AI focused. So that's 15 out of 66 national spots.
And everyone loved them. No, it was not. It was not enjoyable, right? Like, I think the most polite word I heard people use to describe it was exhausting. And then we went all the way up to social media comments like 3 AI commercials in the first 45 minutes. We are in hell.
On one level, it's just advertising. Companies buy expensive Super Bowl slots all the time. I mean, I think it's up to millions of $10 million a slot or something crazy. But I will say the volume and the tone of the AI ads did feel very different. And I think it's worth asking, is this a sign of industry confidence? Or again, we've been talking about this, is this a sign we're in late stage bubble territory?
Yeah. And I saw a comic afterwards and it was just this, like the marketing person and like the business person. And they're like, we are not on the Super Bowl. And they're like, okay. And they're like, it was amazing. They're like, all right, we got a bunch of views. Fantastic. We even won an award. Great. And then the last question from this person is, so did we talk about our brand? And then the person's just silent, right? Like, does anyone know who we are? So all the big players were there, right? Like everyone's advertising on this. You've got Google, Amazon, Meta, OpenAI, Anthropic, and even some newer names like AI.com, which we'll get to in a minute.
That's going to be our AI gone wrong segment. Just as a quick aside, it reminded me of, I don't know if everyone has experienced this like I have, but when you drive across the bridge into San Francisco and you're on that main freeway and there's just every billboard and it's always all tech. Well, the last time I was in San Francisco in December, every single billboard was AI this, AI this. I mean, it was just like so aggressive. This is what the Super Bowl felt like to me. But I think what the tone of what everyone was saying is really interesting because it's indicative of like maybe what the public perception is and what we feel like we need to push the advertising. So the pitch was basically AI is your helpful friend, right? Rather than like some doom scenario apocalyptic. Google had a spot about using Gemini to design your dream home. Amazon had Chris Hemsworth joking about whether Alexa would kill him. That's a little more apocalyptic. And then Ring showed like a lost puppy found by AI-powered neighborhood cameras, which love that. But is that really how the Ring is being used? I don't know.
Yeah, that Ring ad got a lot of backlash, rightfully so, right? And like people pointed out, like, hey, this is just surveillance infrastructure dressed up as a heartwarming story. And
100%.
and to me, that's the most interesting part of this whole thing, because these ads are trying to sell AI, and I think technology as a whole, right, as like friendly and helpful at exactly the moment when public sentiment has shifted the other way. People
Hmm.
are more skeptical, more cautious, and more aware of the downsides, which honestly I'm here for. One of the ones that wasn't an AI commercial but has been playing on one of my streaming platforms is like Google's Watch thing, and it's like this cute little dog and a person, and then their little tagline is like, if your watch knows when it's recharged, shouldn't it know when you're recharged? And I'm like, no, I should know when I'm recharged. Or like, why do I need this technology to tell me if I wake up in the morning, if I'm well rested or not? Like, I don't need you to do that for me. I need you
Yeah.
to tell me the time and get out of my way, right? Um,
Totally. And I think so. I think what you're pointing out is that there's a mismatch between what the ads were saying and what people are actually feeling. Experts picked up on this immediately. There's a researcher from Brown that said he's seen a clear shift specifically in the last 6 months. So poll after poll shows people are more cautious and concerned about AI, which is probably why all these ads are trying to like switch or flip the narrative.
Yeah, and I think, they're in this sell the future mode, right? But
Hmm.
we've all moved on to like, wait a minute, let's think about this. I think on both sides, let's think about this and let's actually use it and see where it works. But also, let's think about this and what it means for us, not just today and in the next 5 minutes or the next quarter, but like for our society and our culture and our
Hmm.
community as a whole. It's honestly giving me vibes from the 2000 Super Bowl, which, I didn't pay a ton of attention to, but it's like really all about the heyday of the dot-com companies and the bubble they were in, right? Like 11 dot-com companies bought Super Bowl ads that year. And then before the end of the year, 9 of them were out of business.
Yeah, I mean, that is not a great comparison for AI companies, right? If we draw parallels. And we're not saying that AI is going to crash the same way. I think, especially given that a lot of it was Google, Apple, Amazon, it's unlikely those are going to be out of business in the next year. But I think when you see this level of ad spend concentrated in one moment with messaging that feels disconnected from reality or trying to force a narrative that, that does start to bring up concerns around a bubble.
Yes. Can I talk about one ad I did think did well relatively? Was actually one of
Good.
Anthropic's. And they ran a spot that basically took a shot at OpenAI saying, there's a time and place for ads, but not in your conversations with AI. And I love that because when companies compete, we as the consumers win, and we just need more
Mhm.
of it.
Totally. And we talked about this. OpenAI has been testing ads in ChatGPT, and Anthropic has positioned Claude as the ad-free alternative. We've discussed the concerns that we have around having ads be, influencing ChatGPT or any AI conversation. So it's definitely something to be aware of. The tagline was something like, your AI should be on your side, not selling to you. And that's spot on. And consumers responded to it. Anthropic saw a 480% spike in signups during the broadcast and a 6,200% increase in Google searches. So it worked. And it also shows like what people are concerned about and what their perspective is. So we've been touting Anthropic for a long time. We are not sponsored by them, unfortunately. That would be great. If anyone from Anthropic is listening, like we are available, but I think the way that they're approaching this is the right way.
Yes. And on the other side, speaking of things that did not succeed, predictably, but also thankfully, is AI.com, which is the perfect segue to the AI.com AI gone wrong for this week.
Yes, exactly. And this is a story that, from my perspective, it has everything. So I love it. Massive spending, massive hype, and an immediate but very public failure.
So AI.com is a new platform from Chris Marszalek, who's the CEO of another fun thing you may have seen Super Bowl ads for a year or two ago, Crypto.com.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he decided to buy the name AI.com for the low price of $70 million, making it,
And make sure
one
it's
of
70 million.
yes,
70. Yeah.
70 and then 6 zeros after that. Just chump change. You just have it lying around right in our cushions. So yeah, it's one of the most expensive domain purchases in history.
Which really highlights that it's a really big bet on his part. But understandably so, there were a lot of questions about what the product actually was. I don't know about you, Sean. I don't sign into an AI.com for my AI chats. So this is where it gets kind of murky. The pitch is that AI.com will let you create personal AI agents that can automate tasks, manage your calendar, handle your workflows, effectively the autonomous assistants, just like we've been talking about today with Claude Cowork.
Yep. And so they ran the Super Bowl ad, I think in the fourth quarter, right? And it cost like $15 million for the slot. So all in, just with the domain cost and the ads, and like probably not including all the lawyers and negotiation they did, it was like $85 million before the product has even launched. And the ad basically said, go to AI.com and reserve your username and your future AI agent.
So, as you might expect, millions of people immediately went to the site and the site crashed. Users got 504 gateway errors, failed signup loops, the whole thing. Horrible experience. The site was basically unusable within minutes of the ad airing.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing. But Marsalek's response was like, we prepared for scale, but not for this, right? As the internet hugged them to death. And he actually blamed Google rate limits because the site only used Google authentication for signups. And then when Google was like, hey, wait a minute, this is weird. We're going to throttle this traffic because it could be a hack or whatever it is. The whole thing collapsed.
Yeah, but when the site came back up, there wasn't even a real product. So when people finally got through, they were asked to enter credit card information to verify humanity and reserve a username for a product that still doesn't exist.
Yeah. So the site was described as early beta, where you're just claiming a handle, right, for your future agent. So there's no functional tool to use. There's nothing it actually does. It's just like, what do you want to name this thing, right? Like, I liken it to like creating a character in a video game, and it's just like, just reserve your name. It's like, you don't actually want to play this thing, but that's going to be your name for this particular agent. So they paid $85 million to get people to a landing page that basically just creates like a wait list, right? Like, there's wait lists and then there's wait lists, and this is the latter.
And it's interesting because this is kind of Silicon Valley thinking right now, that product is so easy to build, but demand is difficult. So I see all over the place, and even been given this recommendation, build the wait list. Like if you build it, people will come kind of thing. But at the same time, like you do have to have something of substance, or at least like if you're saying that you can go sign up and you're not just doing wait lists, like you need to have a fast follow to all of this, or else you're really going to erode your reputation. And understandably, people were not happy. Tech writers started calling it peak AI bubble. Others pointed out that the site looked suspiciously like OpenClaw, which is an open source AI agent framework that we talked about last week. So the theory is they just built a wrapper around someone else's open source project, spent a bunch of money on the domain and advertisements, and kind of hoped that it would work out.
Yeah, and the company denies it, but that's what people are saying. And whether or not it's true, right? We are in an attention economy, right? Like so much money, $85 million was spent here on marketing and distribution to get people's attention, to get their information, to get them to sign up with nothing underneath, right? Like this is fake it till you make it, like to the nth degree. And if you have that kind of money lying around, you probably shouldn't be faking it. You should probably just make the darn thing. So this really fires me up because I think businesses can be a force for good. But this whole like cashing on the hype with branding but no substance is like literally why we can't have nice things. And I think it's part of the reason that why trust in leaders is at an all-time low, right? Like there was recent research I saw that said only 1 in 5 adults trust leaders to do the right thing just about always, or even most of the time.
And so it ties back to the Super Bowl conversation. So when you see this level of spend on AI marketing, both in the overall ad volume and, the, let's call it disasters like AI.com, I think it is a signal that we're in the hype cycle, maybe bubble territory. And so for this audience, what to think about is before you start going and signing up for something that clearly looks like a fad or part of the hype cycle, again, do your research, really dive into it and make sure that it's where you should be spending your time and your money.
Yeah. And if you're one of these organizational leaders that has that kind of money lying around, I don't know, maybe consider making something useful. Just about. Okay.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good place to wrap up the news.
So that's our episode on Claude Cowork.
If you found this useful, please share it with a founder, a business leader, or some administrative person who's drowning in their work, or just your resident AI super user before they like go off and, point your entire SharePoint site into this thing.
And if you've got thoughts or you think we missed something, Or you've already been using Cowork and have a story to share, please hit us up. We are hello@earlyadopter.ai. Remember, there's no E in the adopter. Or at @early_adopter on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, basically everywhere. So with that, Sean, so glad to have you on the podcast. I think you are going to be joining us more and more as we go along, and very excited about that. You always bring a great, unique insight, whether it's from AI policy, AI governance, legal frameworks, specific use cases and all the different businesses that you're working with. So it's great to get another voice in here. We miss Jess quite a bit, so we're excited to get her back, but really appreciate you stepping in, and looking forward to you joining us more.
Thanks, Cal. Always happy to be here. Also miss Jess, but I'll do what I can to stand in the meantime.
Appreciate it. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye, Sean.
Bye, Cal.